I really feel that, that entire that early readers genre is so filled with international fiction that what do you think are key in the ingredients that hook your books to the audience? So anybody who wants to take it first, and then we could go clockwise, however you would want to go.
I don't mind going first.
Please.
So I think for me, when it comes to early readers, if I think about back to as a child when I used to really like reading, and at that time it was all international books. I think for me, what I did see, however, was that over time there were a lot of authors who began writing for early readers in India. I personally have read, the older books by, say, publishers like Kardi, where they had more of the mythology and other such, or even the Amarchitra Kathas and all of that. But then over time, you have authors like Anushka Ravi Shankar, who began writing for early readers in India. And to me, I think what was important when I started reading more of the books set in India is that it was stuff that you could actually relate to, right? Like, no matter how enjoyable Enid Blyton or Roald Dahl and all of them were, they were talking about like foods which were not things that we ate. They were talking about places which I probably never went to, didn't know anything about. I think the first time I ate a scone in my life was in my 20s, and I was massively disappointed because I had imagined it to be completely different from what it turned out to be. So that way, I think when it's set in India, it also feels realistic, right? Like when you read about those children or those people, it's like, hey, I used to do this as a child. This is what my friends looked like, or this is what my friends did. This is how we spoke, the kind of terms we use, the kinds of things we did. So all of that, I just think, helps connect more with the books, and which is why me myself, now I have a 1.5-year-old, and I try and get her as many books as possible from Indian authors as well, because that's what I see she will ultimately connect with, not so much stuff which is set abroad. While those are great stories and we should read all of it, but yeah, I think there's just a connect.
So, Divya, what in your stories, like even I Hate My Curly Hair and Misfit Madhu, do you think it would then be the Indian elements that you bring in it which would be the connecting or the key ingredient for early readers in India today?
Yes, so I think I Hate My Curly Hair, especially when I first thought about it, I actually had seen a lot of books about children who weren't happy with their curly hair, but they were all in an international context, right? And if you really think about it, even for something as basic as curly hair, the take of an African American child in the US and their struggles with curly hair is very, very different from what you have in India. So things that we did in this book is, while the message is still universal and it's about accepting yourself and all of that, there are a lot of touches even in the illustration which will make it very relatable. So you will see that, there is one spread where her hair is being combed by her grandfather and her mother. And, the bottle of oil which is there is like, the kind of oil that you get here. So I will not name brands, but if you see that bottle, it's a very distinct bottle from all of our childhoods as far as hair oil is concerned. So I think those are the things which make a difference, as well as even the names that that she's called in the book, right? There's a bully and the bully calls her certain names. A lot of those is very Indianized. Like I myself got called things like Maggie, baal ki dukaan. These are very local. Nobody in the US is going to call you that. They'll call you something else. So I think those elements also help connect and sort of like bring it closer. Similarly with Misfit Madhu as well, even the name of the app that she creates, right? School Sante. I actually had someone message me on Instagram saying that, I was very happy to see that the app has a name which is from Kannada, because, I'm Kannadiga. So I think those kinds of things make a difference to people.
Madhurima, what about you? Sorry, Neil, if you want to take it over, please do.
No, let Madhurima go ahead. I'll go last. That's fine.
It's just, thank you. It's just, I relate totally. And I think it was great when my kids are in their teens now, but at least a lot of this stuff was available when they were growing up. So we didn't have to feed them Enid Blyton all the time. And they could then actually make a very objective comparison between the sort of stuff that we got fed as children and the stuff that they are reading now. I mean, they read both sort of things equally. But I think it is also to do with the fact that we're not confused about who we are anymore, and that it's okay to actually have our own brand of language, English, and to accept that, yes, across the country we would call our grandmother by many different names, and it's equally all right to have those books, those terms in a book. So I remember once when I was much, many decades ago, I was writing and I wanted to put in the flower Noyontara, and I had to go around asking what Noyontara is in English, because we were taught that you do not use any other terms, you use only English. Now, who knows what periwinkle means in India? I mean, yes, we do now, but we know so much more about Nayantara or gold or, you know, all that sort of thing. And how do you call a puri or a luchi by any other name when you're writing it in English? And, perversely, why should you? So I think that is the stand that we have been able to take, and it's made life and reading and writing much more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Neil, over to
Okay,
you now.
so first and foremost, I was listening patiently to both of you, and it is so relatable what Divya said and what Madhurima said, both of you. Divya told us about, how she, the stuff like Enid Blyton and Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. I'll add some names there. We all grew up reading those things. And I was a big fan of Enid Blyton. I still might have a collection now. I even tried to get my children hooked onto those books, and they gave up, because I don't know, maybe their times have changed, maybe they have a lot of other things to look at, but Enid Blyton didn't work for my children. I'm very sorry to say that, because I know she is a legend, but that's the way it happened. And then I tried to take them to the stores, like they have to read something, right? So, and let them pick their own books. So they ended up picking up things like Tom Gates and Geronimo Stilton. And I was okay that this is the way children are reading now. This is what they are reading. While in our times, it was more of Tinkle and Amay Chitrakatha and Chandamama and Champak. I was a big hoarder of all those comics. So then, when I had to write a book, um, my first book was an adult book, and then later on also I kept writing books for a general audience. My kids weren't supposed to read those because, of course, horror and the themes were quite gory, ghastly. So then there was always this thing that when will my kids read a book? So that was how that entire idea of, okay, I'll write a book, which is a horror book, but for children, took root. That's where it germinated. And then when this opportunity came to write a book, to write a probably which would become a series, then I had to sit down and think, like, what is that one idea that will connect to an Indian young horror reader? And then I went back and thought, like, what do we do as kids? What can scare us? What is frightening to us? And that's where I went back to my days when I was, in school and summer vacations. We would invariably make groups of friends and do things together in summer. That was what we would do because there was nothing else to do. And we were the kids who did not have mobile phones and Netflix and all of that at that time. So we would do those things together. I thought, why not bring that back in today's world? And that is what my children do in the book also. They start an investigation agency, which is called as the Fearless Four. And that's a paranormal detective agency. So that means they are not averse to cracking or trying to crack any kind of case. So that is what the book, that is where the book started. And I also threw this idea at my children. They were my first beta readers. I told them, okay, I'm writing a book about a detective agency. I have my copy too. I'm going to write this book about a detective agency, and they are going to crack all kinds of cases. They are going to be ghostbusters. Would you love to read that? Would you love to at least consider reading this book apart from all your Geronimo Stiltons and Tom Gates and Wimpy Kids? They said, okay, we'll give it a try. Then I said, okay, if you are ready to give it a try, I'll also give it a try. That's how the book started. That's how I started writing. And believe me, I enjoyed it. Because for the first time, I was not writing really dark stuff. I was not in that space of mind where, I get all weirded out myself. But I was having fun writing it. I wrote Playthings as a kind of book for a child who wants a thrill, who wants a kind of adventure. So this is not horror which is dark, disturbing, will leave a scar on you. No, it's not that. This is like a ride in the fun house, in the horror house. This is like maybe a ride on the roller coaster. We love that thrill, right? So that's the thrill that the book is supposed to give. And I think that worked, that connected. Because when my youngest, Felicia, she is 12, she said, Papa, you have written a good book. When she said that, I was like, okay, great. And also then what happened after that was my commissioning editor, Arpita. I really think of her every day that I get a comment about Playthings or a review about it because she was also a big part of shaping the book to what it became. So also what she did is she got the best illustrator on board for this. So that's Rishabh Goswami. So if you see this inside the book also, there were lots of illustrations. Kids are messaging me about it that the drawings are good and all, and that's where I figured, okay, chalo, I can write children's books. Till then, it was largely an experiment.
So, but then isn't Goosebumps popular among children as well, Neil?
It is hugely
So,
popular.
so don't they land up then comparing any Indian sort of horror fiction writing to Goosebumps?
It is
Have you
hugely
received
popular,
that
yeah,
in
because
your yeah? So have you received any of those thoughts in your early reviews currently?
I've received comparisons with Goosebumps, yes. I've also received comparisons with it, of course, because of the cover. It evokes that feeling, there's a clown on the cover. So, apart from that, there is no story connection between the two. It's just the cover that has that similar kind of feel. But Goosebumps, yes, definitely, because Goosebumps is largely written for a children audience, and it's a phenomenon out there in the West, at least. In India, not so much because we don't really know a lot of Goosebumps readers over here. But yes, so eventually we also plan to, like maybe this series will continue and we'll also land up with something like the Goosebumps series of books because that was the initial idea to have uh, things for horror readers of a young age to read. So Mansi, yeah, even before I wrote this, I'm talking about 2 3 years back when I used to have my events for the other books that I released, the general audience book, the ones targeted for the adult readers. At that time, there were always children asking me, when are you writing horror for us? So what I figured is we have a huge reader base who wants to read horror, but they don't have books. I'm talking about the young age kids, like 10 plus. So they want
Yeah.
to read horror because they are hooked on to shows. They are hooked on to things that they can read, graphic comics and all, which are appropriate for their age. They read. And if I digress just a little bit, why do fairy tales and all work so much? If you see the Grimm's fairy tales, they all have a
They
kind of a
all
horror, nasty horror element to them. We
yeah,
sanitize
but that's
it.
the original one and not the Disney plated one.
Yeah. So if you actually read the original one, like what is Beauty and the Beast? You have a girl staying with a beast in a kind of a castle. Now, if that is not horror, the theme itself is horror. What is Hansel and Gretel? A boy and a girl ambling around in the dark woods and landing in a witch's house, and the witch is just planning to cook them and eat them up. So, fairy tales are essentially horror, which we have now, like put all those kinds of wraps on them, and we show them that, okay, these are moral stories and all. But actually, there is horror in that.